Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Question Time Live, episode 94, 95. Don't know, got that mixed up, losing track of it. But there we go. Anyway, not important really. Yeah, so interesting one this evening. I am going to reiterate this a few times because obviously people join at various different times throughout this as well. But yeah, tonight I'm seeing across various different groups and stuff that I follow and I'm in that parasites, complications, sick fish are absolutely all the rage right now. I'm seeing a lot of advice get thrown around in different directions. And for me, a lot of it is all looking very confusing and people might not be knowing what to do for the best. So the only questions I'm prepared to kind of really talk about this evening is fish health, parasites, medications, your sick fish, your problems. I want to keep absolutely on topic with that. So this whole episode provides the most amount of information and advice for people on a lot of these topics. Full stop, really. So don't be afraid if you're out there and you're having some issues or you're curious about any medications, combinations, anything like that. Let's have it, fire it in. If not, I'm going to run through the various different parasites, medications, how I would approach different things. And hopefully you'll get some value from that. And if we run out of time at the end of that, I've got an early night. So there we go. I hope you're all doing well. I obviously hope your pond isn't in chaos at the moment. Obviously, it's the unheated ones. You know, when we look at what's going off, the temperature swings, you know, I've seen the temperatures in outdoor ponds from last week to now today where we're at even. This stuff's bonkers. And I can see, you know, from a lot of it as well, we've gone from nothing, so just cold, to absolutely red hot. And that alone causes a load of problems itself, you know, really, really insane for a pond to go from where it's been pretty dormant to where all of a sudden your fish are swirling, looking for food. You're thinking, wow, we're finally here. But you start treating your pond like that, then all the problems sort of fire up. It's mental. So, yes, that's that one, folks. Just realised as well, I'm on the wrong connection. So, heaven forbid something goes wrong here. Just bear with me a minute. Fingers crossed we are uninterrupted with that one, and it's on the land now. But yeah, that's where we're at. So yeah. Thanks, Abby. This is the fish house tan, mate. This one, in no time, you're just absolutely roasting in there. It's a right old laugh. So yes. So yeah, I think, like I say, feel free to fire your questions in on that. But yeah, for now, I think I'm going to start by sort of with the parasites. Probably my best case treatments for that. You're all going to have probably different ways of approaching this. I know the big one in this is going to be flukes. It always is, but I think it's probably a good idea to know about. Sorry. Yes, Ray, no questions about food, please. Let's have a break from that this week. Yeah, so I mean, let's start. I'll write down to keep. So Trichodina straight away. This should generally be a very easy parasite to treat. It is a fish parasite, but it's very environmental, so it will live. Generally, we say it lives in ponds where you will find a lot of waste and organic matter, because that is where Trichodina will thrive. However, that's not necessarily always the case. I see it in very clean systems still, because ultimately it is a fish parasite. So for me, a really easy one to treat. My go-to for this all of the time, and if you are having Trichodina, always do look for possible areas in your system where it could be thriving, first of all, and try and eliminate those. But yeah, look for potassium permanganate. For me, absolutely every time. We don't want to drag this out. Trichodina hates potassium. You get a decent dose of that in. Half the time, it's not even got to be purple for that long. and your trichodina should be gone. Now, if there is something there in the system causing that to keep coming back, it could even potentially be, if you've not got waste, it could be super, super high levels of organic matter in your water alone, just maybe causing a little bit too much stress on the fish, and it reoccurring from there. So, yeah, potassium permanganate all the way for that one. No need. The likes of Alprex and treatments like that can eradicate it, but it's a lot more drawn out process in your water that I don't think you want to be wasting your time on, to be honest. So, like I say, if you've got trichodina, boom, dose of PP, get that wiped out. When you're using PP, do not always have something to neutralize it to hand. That is important. You know, you need to be weighing it out correctly for one, using the powdered form. Make sure that you get the right dose, super important, weighing it out in grams. The dosage is on the back of the packet at 6.8 gram per 1,000 gallon is the one recommended normally. Now, you may want to adjust that slightly, depending on how much organic load you've got and what reaction time that's going to cause. The thing I would look for here the most is, rather than potentially upping the dose where you're not sure what you're doing, if you find that you put it in, and on the back of these packets, it often says keep the water purple for 15 hours or something crazy like that. That is just ludicrous, and you're pissing in the wind. You could just wipe your collection out if you're not careful. So leave that part. But if you dose at the normal standard dose on the packet, and you find that it's only been, say, purple for 20 minutes or an hour or something like that, then let that go, let that out the system. Probably clean your filters, get the other organic matter that's cleared out as well, and then look to redose again the next day. And whenever you're using PP as well, make sure you do it when you're around, just so you can monitor the fish, make sure everything's all right, maximum water movement and oxygen in there, and everything should be perfectly fine. You oxidize. A lot of people use hydrogen peroxide to clear the potassium after, or in case it goes wrong. Yes, you can do that, but hydrogen peroxide is just a bigger, more aggressive oxidizer than potassium itself, and that's why it wipes it out. And obviously, it saturates the water with oxygen at the same time. The safer way, realistically, sodium thiosulfate, which is just in most liquid dechlorinators, you can use to actually neutralize it and not just oxidize over the top of it. So, but potassium is a phenomenal treatment to have in your arsenal. It's not expensive either. It's superb. You can do a lot with it. The real thing is getting the right dosage, because if you've only got it reacting, and by reacting, we say from when it goes purple, deep purple color, to brown, scummy, that's when we know it's reacted. So that's the time you want to keep track of, but just be careful. I'm going to tell you now, I use my standard dosing generally for PP in ponds that I know got organic matter is 10 gram per 1,000 gallon. I'm not saying go out and do that unless you're experienced, but that's where I'm at with it. And I've used it substantially, and I mean substantially stronger than that, through some testing in ponds that I felt could easily take it based on how they'd performed with other dosages in the past. But you've got to be careful, folks. I cannot stress that enough, because if you get it wrong with this stuff, you're going to do some damage. But yeah, great treatment, and certainly my go-to for trichodina. Just try and use it right. And like I say, you're better off generally using a dose. Even if you went to 3 days of dosing it, it wouldn't really hurt, because each day, technically, the pond should be coming cleaner and the organic load should be dropping. Therefore, it's going to have more impact on the fish when it goes in. So, yeah, that's that one. Next one on the list, a little bit least common. Well, not say least common. I think you might find a bit is Costia. Now, Costia is a really, really interesting parasite. It's a nasty fish parasite as well. Capable, if left, of taking your collection out. It is so aggressive, nasty thing. It actually often tends to live really in a very high temperature range as well, and it's just brutal. Symptoms you'll often see from it could be, and you want to diagnose it with microscope at all times, but symptoms you might often see is the skin pinking, fish isolating. What it tends to do is really eat at the slime coat fast. So if you actually handle one of your fish, they might start feeling a bit dry. But I stress again, of all these, diagnosis really wants to be done with a microscope. I'm not an advocate of just chucking treatment in willy-nilly, because these days there is no one treatment fits all that really wiped everything out, and excessive medication is no good for any collection. That's just more stress, yet again, to be fair. So Costia, my go-to for Costia is actually Columbo Alprex for two reasons, really. A, it is fantastic at getting rid of Costia, but B, I believe it's also absolutely superb because of the makeup of it for actually treating that very symptom there I mentioned where the slime coat becomes incredibly damaged. So Columbo Alprex is a strong mix of acroflavin and malachite green. Malachite green is generally a treatment that's exceptionally good for getting for stopping fungus, but there too is potassium as well. But obviously, when that slime coat's damaged, this is all secondary stuff that can come if it gets bad enough. So however it works, it's fantastic at destroying Costia. Sometimes it's a 2-day treatment as well. I can often clear it just with the first dose. I often actually check to see if it's done it to avoid using the second dose as well. It's not always necessary. But the Costia, the acroflavin element of this, now it's a bit frustrating because it does turn the water green and stains it green for quite a while. You want to turn your UV off for at least 7 days while you're using that. But yeah, the acroflavin element is incredibly soothing for the skin, and I believe that's what can really help get them fish back on track after any kind of level of Costia, but certainly when it's bad, and that I would really, really strongly recommend. You can use potassium, I've done in the past for Costia, but I believe with that, you're going to have to really get the dose in quite strong. And often that can be quite damaging to the slime coat as well, which is not perfect. You know, when it's already struggling a little bit, and it can be, especially if it's bad Costia, PP can potentially be a bit heavy to go and hit them with. The other treatment that will work is malachite and formalin. But again, malachite and the formalin part of that, again, formalin is quite aggressive. So hence why my go-to tends to be the Alprex because of that strong acroflavin element in there. And it would avoid doing the likes of a PP treatment and then using acroflavin on its own after to try and aid recover the slime coat, because that's just dragging the whole process out, which I don't necessarily want, or you don't want to be doing. So that's my go-to. Alprex is a phenomenal treatment and it is safe. You do, however, just need to be careful because you want a decent level of KH in your water prior to treatment. If you have got incredibly soft water, it might be one to avoid, in all honesty, because that's where people have had problems with it over the years. It's been in super soft water where there's not been enough KH. For whatever reason that is, I don't know. That's beyond me. But that is one just to watch out for and make sure you've got a decent level. I'm happy to treat around 4 or 5 marks of hardness on that. So but if you can get it to 6-ish around there, fantastic. You'll be fine. But like I say, if you have got really soft water, you might be better off looking at an alternative like malachite and formalin, in all honesty. But yeah, that's about as much light as I can shed on that one. Now we'll get to an interesting one. And this is these days tends to be a little bit less common in white spot. Now, white spot for me, this has always fascinated me. And there is a cycle to white spot. I can't remember exactly what it all is. That's when I used to be into reading books years ago. But my kind of mentality to treatment has always kind of been pretty much where the Japanese are. And they try and just get in there, get it done as quickly as possible, not dragging stuff out. And for me, I'm kind of thinking with white spot, you'll need to clear the white spot, but also the cysts that will be in there before, obviously, when they explode or burst is when your white spot, the juvenile stuff starts spreading again. So, yeah, for me, I believe if you've got white spot, a strong enough treatment should be able to destroy it all in one hit. And I have got plenty of evidence of all this. I actually recently, and it surprised me, the Super Male Pond, after I'd mixed a few fish in, they developed white spot. And it's the first time I've seen that for as long as I can remember. And I was shocked, and you see it because, again, it's a super aggressive fish parasite. It's going to make them fish look sick, very heavy mucus, pinking of the skin very quickly, and they are going to look like shit. And often when the medication goes in, which for me, it's always got to be something formaldehyde-based when you're treating white spot to eradicate it. When you use that, they often tend to sink in and look even worse for a while when the treatment's in, until it's sort of fizzled out and the white spots start to clear. Now, in that case, again, with that, I went in and just one treatment eradicated it for me. I've seen over the years people use it where they're treating it, 7 days later, or 2-3 doses of treatment to eradicate it. At the end of the day, you need to use your microscope and just keep on this stuff. You will kill the cycle eventually. You can tell if it's big, mature white spot because ultimately that will show in the skin as little grains of sugar. Now, the last time I saw it like that would be back in my dad's shop days when we used to do fish diagnosis for people. But yeah, in this case, it was only visible through mucus biopsy. And yeah, 1 dose. But my go-to treatment for this, again, is Columbo FMC 50. Now, the reason for that, I believe if the treatment is actually strong enough and effective enough, it should just be able to wipe it out and destroy it. But you've got to get that right. Underdosing and a weak treatment is not going to help. And that is why I believe we're in a position where people are potentially retreating because they've not got it strong enough the first time. Now, I can't remember the exact specifics, but I do know with FMC 50, it's not just malachite and formalin, the Columbo one. It is malachite, formaldehyde, and methylene blue. But what also is, I know the formalin in there is actually way stronger than any other bottled medication I'd seen at that point. It was some years back when I looked into all that stuff, but it was very, very potent. And again, in this case, I treat 1 dose, eradicated it completely. If it is really bad and mature, you have to be careful because the white spot can actually embed in the epidermis and become protected by it a little bit. So in them cases, you might need to look at a couple of treatments for sure. But if it's something you've just diagnosed by mucus biopsy and it's quite early on, 1 strong treatment should be more than enough to get the job done there. But in any case, regardless of what you do and what regime you go with, you need to have something formaldehyde based, in my opinion, to truly clear that up. It's got to be strong and quite potent. And this is a parasite you need to act on fast. You don't want to be leaving it because, like I say, it's a nasty bugger and it will do a lot of damage, a hell of a lot. So that is quite a simple one. It's a rare one. I don't even see it cropping up with people all that often. Very stress induced, but a lot of parasites are. They used to actually say that obviously temperature was a big one that would trigger white spot. More so moving from hot into cold. I've actually done some trialing with that years back, and I couldn't induce it from taking fish from very warm to very cold very quickly. Believe it or not, flukes it managed to induce, which nobody will be surprised there. But yeah, not white spot, which I was quite shocked at. So yeah, there we go. But between that and Costia, that is 2 that if you've got them, you need to be absolutely on it. I've just had to medicate upon, believe it or not, at 28 degrees. I've found Costia on it, and I was shocked. The symptoms were all pointing towards it, so I was really particularly looking hard to find it, and it did take some finding. It was really in the early stages. But yeah, it's aggressive, and that's the kind of stuff. If you see those symptoms, you can't afford to leave it with this parasite because that, before you know it, a few of the fish, as the symptoms they were showing at that point, if I'd have left that another day, thought I'll deal with that tomorrow, I could have potentially lost 1 or 2 of them fish, and they were very valuable, exciting prospects as well, which would make it even worse. So yeah, don't leave this stuff, guys. And just to stress, if you're in a position where you've not got a microscope, for what one of those costs these days versus the cost of a cheap koi even, or a few cheap koi that'll build your collection, you need a microscope, and you might not necessarily know what you're doing, but practice makes perfect. The more you can look and learn, there's plenty of content, I'm sure, out on YouTube and everything to show you how to use it and get the most out of it. So that's what I'd suggest you do, because again, it saves time rather than, how long is it till I can get to my local dealer to have one checked. By that point, a couple of days might have gone by, and that couple of days is what could really set you off on a wrong trajectory. Because not only the likes of these parasites, if you leave them too late, you don't suffer severe losses, which are possible. The real likelihood is from this, you're going to get secondary problems, and them secondary problems is really going to be along the lines of bacterial problems. That's what you will open up, and believe me, that you want to avoid that shit at all costs. So yeah, really act, and that is the the best piece of equipment you're going to do. You're going to invest in and learn how to use. In the cases of, I'm going to go a little bit off topic here, but when you're actually when I'm looking at them ponds, generally going through, obviously I can assess a lot by what I'm looking at. But when I see fish not right, so in the case of the pond I've just mentioned that had Costia, I noticed those fish weren't right. I knew from what we were dealing with and the symptoms I saw it was going to be parasitic. But my first method of diagnosis is always to check the mucus, take a biopsy to check for parasites and eradicate that. Because yes, bad water will cause you problems, but in mature ponds, bad water is less of an issue. Generally for the kind of things we're talking around. And I always just like to eradicate parasites first and foremost, get that out of the equation. If there are something there, obviously I'm going to have a look before any medication. My primary parameter to check is going to be KH, just to make sure I've got that capacity in the water and everything's good there, because that is important. What I'm not worrying about too much, to be honest with you, and this is scenarios you might come up against where you're confused. Say you've got a parasite outbreak, any parasite of any description, but your water quality isn't the best at the same time, talking ammonia or nitrite, you are in a tricky position there. But my choice there is to straight away deal with the parasite first. Ammonia, to be honest with you, if it's that, you'd want to try and, decent water change and get that level down as low as possible. But a lot of the time, the parasite will do more damage faster than the water will potentially. So if you are in that kind of scenario, yes, you're in a tough spot. Nitrite, not so much. If the nitrite's there, it kind of is what it is. You've got to get rid of those parasites because, like I say, especially the Costia white spot, in the warm water that was in, that Costia will spread like wildfire. And it's a free-swimming parasite as well, so it quickly spreads through the community, especially if you've got a denser stocking level. Absolutely brutal. So really got to be mindful of that. But yeah, my go-to straight away, more often than not, is to parasites first. And then if that doesn't point me in the right direction, I start looking elsewhere. And I know a lot of people often head to the water test kit first when there's a problem, but get to know parasites, diagnosing them and getting shut of them. Because honestly, when you can be proactive with that and nip it all in the bud quickly, you will prevent the likes of a bacterial problem and stuff ever really starting. If you've got good husbandry in general, you're just going to keep everything ticking along nicely. What I don't believe in, and this feeds into the whole keep it simple and you don't want too much information, is proactively scraping too much. Now we proactively scrape, but this is very different. We're in a business here, we're shipping fish around, we need to make sure that stuff's clean. And in that case, every Monday morning comes, we proactively scrape every pond where there's fish that could potentially be sold that week. I don't do everything in the greenhouses. That I just do based on, so right, that doesn't look right. Now I need to act. If everything's looking all right, I'll leave well alone. That's where I'm at with that. If you go scraping every week, the chances are, if you look hard enough, you'll probably find a fluke or two, and then you're going to find that you're going to be treating every other week as well, or every week, and that's going to be no good as well. So yes, be mindful of that one. Chilodenella, next one up. Again, another aggressive fish parasite, very closely kind of linked in its behavior to white spot. And, all of these three, Costia, white spot and Chilodenella, you'll get very, very similar symptoms displaying in the fish with them as well. Now, Chilodenella, you can pretty much wipe out the same way as Costia and white spot, to be honest. A malachite and formalin-based treatment will do it. PP would do it, but again, you're going to have to be strong enough. So that would be my, I wouldn't be looking at that one these days, to be honest. So it would be, again, Alprex can do it. Great. And again, for the same reasons, because it can really help with the skin because it is an aggressive parasite that will really hit the slime coat. Or malachite and formalin. There you go, twos there with that one. But again, one you want to diagnose and get gone quickly because it can be devastating if left unchecked. Just trying to think now if I've missed anything, because I could well have done off the top of my head. Chime in, guys, if we can. I know we're heading to the flukes and the gill flukes right now, which will probably take us the next 40 minutes to get through that one. And I'm sure a lot of you are sat there now just pulling your hair out, going, when the hell am I going to get rid of these fucking flukes, to be fair? Trick, Costia, white spot, Chilodenella fluke. Yeah. Anyway, there's a few other rare ones that I don't really think I need to go into. Epistallius was one that I've seen a couple of times over the years. You'll find that in some books and on the internet. Again, if that was to ever come up, you kind of like malachite and formalin on that one as well. You've got the physical parasites. And again, they're a lot less. You don't see them a lot. So you've got fish lice and anchorworm. Now, if you've got natural ponds, these could be a lot more prevalent and a lot more common. But this is a parasite that you would often, for the type of ponds that you guys have, this would be something that you would bring in on a host. So this is the interesting thing. You can bring parasites in, i.e. you bring a new fish. The new fish could have parasites when it arrives. That can happen. But likewise, after introducing a new fish, you could introduce a fish that is clean. A few days later, because of all the stress in the process, it's triggered something. So be mindful and aware of that as well at them points. But yeah, this is generally one that you really do bring in, fish lice and anchorworm. Now, it is often one that you need to physically remove. It helps in the process. You'll see them fish lice will literally skit across the top of the skin, and anchorworm embed himself under the scales. So you would want to, in the case of having them, really go through the whole collection just to physically remove any first of all, and then use medication, which is often a fluke medication, which will kill that family of parasites as well. But they are super, super rare. I don't think you're going to see them too often, say unless, autumn harvest time in Japan, for example, fish coming in from mud ponds. That's a prime case where these can happen and can be visible, and would have to deal with them at that point in that way. Japanese generally use a really strong, potent treatment called Mazaton for this, but that's not available in the UK. I think it's actually banned. So, yeah, pretty nasty stuff, though. I still remember actually when my first work experience trip was medicating a mud pond, because this stuff is that strong. Half a packet can medicate a whole fry pond. And they were doing it just as a preventative measure. And they sort of like got me in, weighed us up in the bowl, right, tip this in. And then afterwards they went and said, oh, we really should have covered your face with that. It's just mental stuff. I remember getting a whiff of it and thinking, Jesus, what that is, but naughty, naughty stuff. But like I say, generally your fluke treatments are going to be the one that's going to correct and sort that out for you. And then, yeah, moving on to the dreaded guys, we'll start with those skin flukes. And I don't really know where to start with this, to be honest with you. Every time we seem to talk about this, kind of highlight the problems and not really know where to go with it. But treatments, so this regime I'm going to speak about is one we have spoke about in the past, but just going to reiterate it again. I believe the biggest problem with fluke treatments right now is generally they're not strong enough for doing the job, or you're in a position where you don't accurately know your pond volume, and then you're possibly underdosing then with a medication that's not actually as potent as it could be to actually get the job done. So that I am very, very mindful of as being the root cause of the issues here. Now, flukes are a bit different. Flukes are an environmental parasite. They're always around. They're being kept at bay by the fish's slime coat, the environment. They're just looking for that opportunity to start applying in numbers. And when the environment allows the fish's immune system to take a bit of a dip, flukes are getting in there and multiplying in numbers. And then, that's when you start seeing excessive mucusing and other symptoms. So what I'm seeing is a lot of people in this case, and this part of this advice is going to apply to all of these treatments as well, really. I think obviously dosing is your issue. You want to get as accurate as possible. The type of treatment sometimes wants mixing up, because out there they're all different. So we've got like Fluxol, which is praziquantel based. You've got flubanol based treatments as well. And then you've got the likes of Lernex, which I believe the main active ingredient was levamisole, and that was then mixed with flubendazole and something else that I can't even pronounce, to be honest. So sometimes changing the medication can help, but I believe that still the same issue applies, is in the getting the dose exactly right. So from this as well, what we don't know, because a lot of these medications you can't actually see in the water properly, so you don't truly know how active they are. I think a big issue with fluke treatments these days is that it'll often say retreat after 7 days, which leads you to think that is active in the water for 7 days. Now, I'm calling bollocks on that one, because that's really not the case. I think a lot of these treatments are being metabolized by the general biological action of the system. If you've got showers running, the degassing effect there can also have an impact on getting it out of the water as well. So everything like that, you do not truly know how long that fluke treatment, regardless of your dose, is active in the water for. And that is a lot of the problem. There's no way of indicating that or finding that out whatsoever. Hence why, with the treatments, the sort of regime that's kind of been recommended is to give them a dose on day one, a full dose, then using the same medication, 50% dose on day 2 and 50% dose on day 3. Because what that's doing is ensuring you're keeping more of a quantity of the treatment in the water without overdoing it. Because don't get me wrong, again, I've had to play around with some of these treatments, but I'm not going to go in because I just don't want anybody thinking, oh, I'm going to give that a go and pointing the finger in my direction. But I have done stuff with dosages on these way, way stronger. And yeah, it's been no negative effects as I've seen. And that's fish that have been with me and around for quite a long time now as well. So that is massively important. I believe just coming around to it, preparation for treatment. Again, really important. I have mentioned this before. You need to make sure your system is clean before a treatment. Don't just go putting it in there. Clean your filters out right before you do it. Give a bit of a water change, top that water up, get some fresh in there, lower the organic readings because that's going to make every treatment more efficient. Especially, obviously, PP, you can see it a little bit more because you've got the oxidization reaction and you can see how it plays out. But doing all that prep is going to make any treatment more effective, and it's always super helpful. But like I say, we don't know with any of them, even malachite and formalin base, you often see the blue go out of the water after 24 to 48 hours. So how do you not know that the formalin's all gone as well? Because it's a clear liquid. Absolute nightmare. And you're in a real predicament. So yeah, when do you retreat? But yeah, with flukes, I think that's the one. Try and get the dose, even if it's a case. I think it's safe enough with a lot of these treatments to put that little bit of an extra scoop in. I don't think there's going to be any harm with that. I haven't got a lot of advice on how they react differently with hard and soft water as well. That's really from manufacturers, and I've not seen where that's ever been kind of provided. Now, with the flukes, interestingly, the Japanese, one of the last conversations I was having with one of the breeders was that they, in cooler water, in fact, just let me make a note of that, come back to. In cooler water, they're using base ingredients. So not going to hide the fact, they're getting flubendazole powder in Japan. And then as they're using that, they're actually increasing the dosage higher when it's cool, which makes sense because the absorption is a lot slower. So to have more treatment in the water, it's going to have less effect on the fish and a more chance of doing its job on the fluke. Obviously, when it's warmer, the absorption's higher, so it's a lower dosage. Kind of makes sense in that respect. But they are pretty much making up their own dosage rates with a bit of trial and error as they go along. And that's the problem that we have here. I'm happy to do trial and error with a lot of my fish to get stuff working, but I can't come on here and do that. I'll let you guys know because ultimately there's too many variables. And if we get it wrong, there's a load of dead fish around, and that's what we don't want happening, or damaged fish, bits and bobs. So yeah, with your fluke treatments, like I say, potentially mixing up the treatments, look at your dosage, preparing the pond properly, getting it right, doing a day 1, 50% day 2, 50% day 3. So basically you're trying just to avoid overdoing it in that case, and recheck them, after day 3, check and see where you're at. And then, you potentially leave it a few days then, and then retreat again if need to be, start that process. I believe there doesn't need to be this whole 7-day malarkey that people say. You need to get them parasites gone, and you don't want to keep dragging it out. Another big one in the reoccurrence of flukes, guys, is you really need to be looking at potential stress factors, because reoccurring flukes, for me, example in the growing ponds, not something that happens. I get them medicated, get out of it, job done. That's where they're at if they happen to occur. But in those environments, and make a note of this, we're talking 25-degree water, very, very well nourished, well fed fish, high stocking levels in my case. I wouldn't say the kind of stocking levels I'm using if I'm stock holding. That's a lot higher and can cause parasites to spread a lot faster. It's generally a great environment. I'm not using too much fresh water. You know, everything in there is basically reducing stress factors, and that's what I'm going to come around to on this one, is looking at those stress factors. So what we want to consider here is at 25 degrees, you're getting really optimal immune response from your fish, their absolute peak. I keep saying this a lot at various things. Every degree under that 25 degrees, you're moving away from optimal immune performance. It makes sense. And in some of these temperatures, as you start getting lower, it's more favored towards the parasite than the fish at times. As it does get warmer, some parasites can't sustain over 28 degrees. And I've seen that, you know, some of them, just as it gets 25, 26, they struggle. But at 28 degrees, there's just nothing living anyway. Weirdly, on that one, Kostya is one of those. And like I say, I've had that at 28 degrees in the pond I mentioned last week. So, you know, what the textbooks say, you can't always be believed in practice. Most of the time, it's different. But yeah, stress factors. So just think alone, this time of year, your unheated ponds, the temperature fluctuations alone are a stress factor. Getting the feeding right, because you've got such swinging temperatures, you're possibly getting a spike in your water parameters. That's a stress factor. So many different things. When you add a new fish, it's a stress factor. When you put the net in to catch a fish, it's a stress factor. If you've got bad source water, i.e. you've not dechlorinated properly, dechlorination, as well as the damage it's going to do, it's going to cause stress. If you've got trace metals in the background, even at potentially low levels, it's a potential stress factor. There's just so much there that's causing stress elements all the time that you might not be aware of. On top of that, these fluctuating temperatures and everything that goes on at that point, stress. And it's that stress that's just enough to cause a bit of a dip in them for them few flukes to crop up, and away you go again. So, you know, this is why, and I know this is always a tough subject, but any form of heating you can potentially get on there, just for even this time of year, just to stable out your temperatures and stop the fluctuations, is potentially going to help you and eliminate a lot of this stuff until we can get to a more stable kind of 18 and above. Your filters finally woke up and that's caught up and that's up to speed. So you're not getting any fluctuations in your parameters. All that kind of stuff is going to help prevent them. But you do need to be thinking stress factors, because that's enough to keep them few flukes cropping up. Gill flukes, bit of a different beast than ones, but ultimately I'm kind of in the same camp on this. Screw the cycles and all the rest of it. You just need a treatment strong enough to get it all blitzed out. And if you get that bit right, you're going to get it done. Gill flukes can be a little bit harder to diagnose. When you're taking a biopsy, it's a really good idea to really get it. If you're not comfortable going into the gill with a smaller slide, getting it just around the gill cover there, getting some mucus out to help. You will often find them on a skin scrape as well, but at that point, you know, there's probably a bigger population in the gill that needs dealing with. But they're all the same treatments. Do you need a follow-up treatment? Yes, potentially looking at eggs with them. So, but I still stand by, if you get that treatment right first time, you're going to get rid of them. But if not, it's probably wise. Again, they would say after 7 days, but your problem here is no different, because you are looking at having, is that treatment active in the water for long enough? So, you know, if you kind of miss it with gill flukes, you'd potentially, if it's a heavy infestation, for me, if it's just a couple, you're probably going to be enough with your day one, 50% day two, 50% day three treatment. You don't always need to be using the pro treatments either. I'd be mindful of some of them that they get a little bit too strong. And if you've not done anything like pre-prepping your water or something like that, or, you know, trying a little bit more dosage of the regular fluke treatments, I'd always sort of stay that way if you can. But yeah, with the gill flukes, again, that's kind of where you're at. Like I say, if the treatment is right, you should be eradicating them. End of. But if you do want that peace of mind, basically on that treatment regime you've got, after about day, sort of 5 days later after finishing the third treatment, then you'd want to hit it again with a full dose to try and be certain you've got it all. But yeah, I think, guys, that is potentially all the parasites covered. One thing I have seen around is sleeping sickness symptoms, I think this is a good one to also cover off. And the part salt can play in all this, and I'm going to say it again, right? There is no debate in koi keeping around whether salt is useful or should be used or not. There are times, as a hobbyist, probably a lot less, but on our side of the fence, without salt, and on a breeder's side of the fence more so, there's so many things we won't get over. I couldn't stop sleeping disease without salt. There's no other treatment I can use that doesn't make the problem 10 times worse. It is only that. So it is really useful and has its place. Now, in the case when you've got these high stress, like this time of year, high stress environments, 0.3% of salt might just be enough to ease some pressure on their body, let their immune system actually kick in a bit, because you'll take some osmotic pressure away from the body, which is a big energy drain for them. And what it might just allow to do is ease through that stress. It's going to protect them a little bit more against any nitrite spikes that are coming up as well. And what you will find is just about every medication I know of, you can use safely with 0.3% salt in the pond. I have even used formaldehyde on its own is a no-go. You want zeroed salt with that. But I have used malachite and formalin as a mixture with 0.3% salt to absolutely no issues whatsoever. So potassium as well. So I managed to pen me my laptop. Potassium with that as well, not a problem. There's no reaction there. You know, in Japan, I'm sorry, there's another one as well I'd sort of noted. I know it's going off topic again, but what I am also finding is quite common, certainly after some particular fluke treatments, that Costia is becoming a secondary problem as well. So really be on the lookout for that. Now, again, in Japan, I'm finding that they're actually cocktailing medications, and this is interesting. I have been having to play around with this on some batches. I'm not going to say what with, and these fish I'm going to have for a while, so I'm monitoring how they sort of perform. But it makes sense as to why they're doing this, because, again, medication is a stressful time. You know, you're damaging filter bacteria potentially with a lot of these, and you're causing stress through medicating alone. And it's not something you want to keep dragging out. And when they actually sit back and look at the combinations that they're using and the way they could potentially interact with each other, there's nothing that's actually generally reacting with each other to become something else. Is there potentially one that wipes out another? And again, in these types and these instances that are being mixed, no, I don't believe that there is. And it kind of makes sense. And one of the cocktails I have used is to try and prevent against this. So it's using a medication that would hit Costia alongside a fluke treatment at the same time. And I saw absolutely no negative effects from it whatsoever. That tank of fish is now looking incredibly good and coming on really strong. And there's been no secondary Costia come from it. That doesn't happen all the time. It's just one I want you to be aware of. I'm not exactly sure for the reason why that's happening. Costia really does prey on fish when they're weak. Could it be something on them lines? I don't know, but want to be really aware of. But yeah, just coming back to the salt thing, it's a really useful treatment. But yeah, symptoms. So if you've got fish laying, that's a different beast. But when you've got fish laying, the first thing you need to do is look, is it the general population? Is it just one fish? If it's one fish, it could really be struggling. It could be something a bit viral, as if it's got flu. You know, I'm just going to name it as that. It's obviously not, but it's around a viral group of, you know, issues that can affect them. And yeah, it's not necessarily sleeping disease, because you will get the symptoms of sleeping disease with a lot of fish. With a lot of viral problems. So, and the same symptoms, the kind of laying, the pinking of the skin. But generally what you'll get when it's down that route is no parasites. It will damage the slime coat and make the fish susceptible to a parasite as a secondary problem, which is an issue here. And things like Costia would be the common things you would see crop up in this occasion. But yeah, primarily what we're doing with those batch of symptoms is, right, actually, we know now it's that route because we can't really see anything parasitic. Is it one fish? If it's one fish, it's possibly something isolated to that fish alone, struggling. It might be coming out of winter, just really, really weak and struggling. The biggest thing to do with that, with a fish like that, if you've ruled out it being a general parasitic problem, is to get it in warm water to get the immune system firing and salt up stronger, around 0.5 to 0.6%, to really ease osmotic pressure and let the immune system start doing its thing and take that pressure away from the fish. Because osmotic failure is a big problem with all this. It's one of the main reasons sleeping sickness does so much damage, is the osmotic system fails, and basically your fish start dehydrating and multiple organ failure will follow from that. It's quite a brutal death, to be honest, when it happens, but it can be very hard to pull them back when they've gone to a certain point. So be mindful there. But if it is just one fish, it can be quite hard. If you can't heat, bringing the salt up is not going to hurt anything else in the pond. So focus on getting that one fish right. If it's along the sleeping sickness, truly sleeping sickness from the CEV virus, Carpedema virus, then you're going to see it spread through the general population quickly. And if not dealt with within 2 or 3 days, you're going to have mass mortalities. It's very, very rare that in your guys' pond, you're actually going to be dealing with that, unless you're potentially dealing with like new fry or something like that. You've had that potentially had no exposure to that. Because most of that work should have been done by the dealers with your fish coming in. A lot of the breeders do it. It's something it's the main part of our quarantine procedure, is making sure we've kind of induced that state, if it's there to be had, and overcoming them from it. Because once they have overcome it, generally they're immune to it and would not suffer in the same way. They might throw a few little symptoms, but nothing as severe as what it comes. But like I say, you will get viral illness. You can see it even when you add new fish. You add new fish to a pond. There could be something within your general population that they've got immunity to that your new fish hasn't. Then all of a sudden the new fish, are exposed to it. And that shows the symptoms. No parasites. They just look a bit pink, very off it for a few days, until, if the water's warm enough, their immune system might naturally pull them around from it. If it's not warm enough, they might sink into a really deep sulk. At that point, you're going to want to intervene, and salt is really the best thing you can do for that at that point. When they're in that state, if you hit them with the hard medications that we've spoke about, you're going to make that fish worse and potentially even kill it. So got to be careful there with that one. But yeah, looking good in that respect. So again, just one to watch and bear in mind with that. I'm not sure, guys, if there's much more I can add to that other than potential combinations, because I know this hits you, and this is some stuff that I've seen, is if you're getting a combination of parasites that require different treatments. So if you, for example, and this is knowing what to prioritize in this case, so let's just go with a Costia, even there, Costia, Trichodina, and flukes. Let's go for it really bad. So I'm just going to write that down so I don't forget. Right. So in that case, how I'm assessing that situation, because basically there is a chance you could wipe a few of it out using one treatment or two treatments. But if we're generally looking at it from what I've sort of mentioned, that could be a potential 3 treatment job to get that done. But what we want to do is see if we can use one of these other treatments to eradicate some of the parasites. So in that case, I'm looking at what's going to do the most amount of damage in the shortest space of time. So straight away, I'm prioritizing Costia. That one needs to be checked first because it's nasty and it's going to do a lot of damage quickly. So in that case, there is a chance that if you go in with Alparex can treat Trichodina. So there's a good chance in treating that there, you'll also eradicate the trick. But I'm not worried about the trick because it takes a lot of trick over a long period of time to really kill a fish. You'll make them look terrible, make them look like shit, but it's not the most aggressive parasite. And likewise, flukes, again, it's going to need high numbers over a long period of time to really start doing the damage. Costia, over a short period of time, is going to rip through your collection. So let's get that eradicated. So using the Alparex there, potentially going to get rid of that. I would leave it no more than 7 days after that before rescraping, seeing what the situation is then. If the trick's gone, fantastic. If it hasn't, we're presuming at that point. And even though there might be still some coloration from the Alparex, bit of water changing there, it's not as strong and active in the water, so not too much to worry about, and we need to get on with treating this other stuff. So we're presuming Costia's gone at that point. And now we're looking at the flukes, and potentially, let's say the trick is still there. Now, again, with that batch, what I would probably do then at that point is go with potassium, because there's a chance with the potassium we're also going to hit the fluke population. Outside chance, not always guaranteed, depending on the dosage. So I go that with there. We'll say we eliminate the trick and just say the flukes are still there at that point. I would end with the fluke medication. Now, that potentially, if you had to treat all them individually because one single treatment didn't do it or hit any of the others, you're potentially looking at a 3-week kind of period there, unfortunately, before you've got rid of them all. But the hope is, and in reality, 2 medications there would hopefully knock it all out. But it's about prioritizing them. And in that list of treatments, I would put your Costia, White Spot, and Chiladenella absolutely top of the pile if you're finding multiple parasites as the ones to absolutely hit first. Second to that, really, I would probably put Trichodina, and then the flukes probably at the bottom of the list, in all honesty. But kind of level pegging, flukes, trick, all them. But yeah, your nasty ones to get rid of first, like I say, are those proper fish parasites. So that's where I would look with that, guys. Now, I think I've covered pretty much most stuff there with that, as much as I can, playing out a few different theories and all that. One theme you will notice there is, if you're dealing with this stuff, the big thing that I'm not stressing is going with too much on the water. Because if you've got these parasites, ultimate thing is it's going to be damaging your filters, the medications anyway, and you've got to get rid of the parasites. Like I say, if you've got poor water quality, you are in a bit of a pickle there with all this, but you can't have poor water going on and just leave the parasites unchecked for too long, because before you know it, they're going to be circling the drain. So really got to be careful. But I would prioritize getting the parasites gone before you then look at readjusting and fixing the water from that scenario. So I hope you found that bit useful. Little useful thing here from Dave. So yeah, if I get flukes, I normally PP to strip the slime coat, then go in with fluke treatment the next day. Is that good practice? Yeah, it can be. I've seen chloramine T treatments with this. Now, the reason I've not mentioned chloramine T is I'm not a big lover of the treatment. It can serve its purposes, but that is one that is such an aggressive treatment that can obviously go in and level bacteria, good and bad. And that's just something you've got to be really careful with. So I'm not a huge advocate of it. The thing with PP, ultimately, are you actually really reducing the slime coat all that much with the dosage that you're using? I would be the biggest thing I could possibly take from that, and it might not even be using it the next day, is following on from the PP. What you're going to have done is lower the organic matter in the water, which will then potentially allow the fluke treatment to have more of an impact. But I still revert back to the fact of I don't think the medications are generally strong enough. And if they were, and you got the dosage absolutely spot on, even with a bit of trial and error using a stronger dose, if that's where you were at, that is what I believe will potentially clear your flukes and then the reoccurrence by looking at potential stress factors. One easy way to cure it: cook your water up to 25, look after your water, and you won't see flukes. You might get them like the odd time if you trigger a stress event. I think the reality is it's circumstances that are causing a lot of the problems a lot of the time. So, yeah, I'm a bit, I've absolutely fired that out over 53 minutes, folks. I'll just have a quick flick through your questions. Let me have a look, see if there's anything that I've sort of missed. I'm not going to start going in depth now about anything too much, guys, but I hope I've provided enough info on that. And if you did tune in late, I did say at the beginning I was going to spend this whole hour just focusing on sort of health, parasites and medications, because I just think that's so important and affecting so many people right now from what I've seen. Let's have a look. Yeah, I mean, there's an interesting one. So, what are your thoughts, if any, on using Superverm? Now, Superverm isn't a very effective treatment at getting rid of flukes, but you've got to be careful with the stuff. I have seen that. I've seen the negative effects of Superverm many years ago. when you get it wrong, because there is one of the compounds in it can be very toxic. So if you are going down that route, guys, whatever it is, desperation, and you manage to get hold of it, obviously it's not easy to do either. Just please be super, super careful on what you do with that. There is some useful information on that. Dr. Eric Johnson, an American fish vet, really looked into all that years ago. So if you look him up, you might find some useful information. But fact of the matter is, you're not really going to obtain that legally unless you're a sheep farmer. So yeah, that is one of the unfortunate things with that, and it is the kind of same kind of family of active ingredients. I think it's mebendazole is the active ingredient in that. Obviously, flubendazole is the one we're using in a lot of our treatments, and that natural form, the stronger form of that, actually comes in a pig wormer. Believe it or not, if you didn't know that already. But yeah, there we are, guys. To be honest with you, I'm going to leave it at that. I've had a super, super long day, and I think we've covered a lot in there altogether. Next week, we'll be back to the kind of usual format for all this. And yeah, I did actually say, if you follow me on the WhatsApp group, there was a bit of a nice, very tasty Kaze Showa, in fact, that is a cracking male piece that I'm going to be offering, including growing. So I'm going to pop that out shortly after this. But yeah, there we go, folks. I've talked myself to sleep nearly there. I feel absolutely shot. So I'm going to go, going to hydrate. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Like I say, stay tuned. I've actually filmed the video today for the, I say I've dropped it a little bit, the amazing Saito Ginrin Karashis that I've got that I've sort of featured on WhatsApp as well. So look out for that coming at the weekend. That was the polite way of putting it. Obviously, my wife doesn't let me hide from the fact that it is a full-on twat tan, and yeah, it comes from the greenhouses, mate. It's the coil sale tan. So there we go. But yeah, like I say, thanks, guys. Yeah, going to be some cool stuff. News on the NND Mud Pond event coming very soon, as well as we work through that. So happy days. Thanks for everyone that tuned in. Nearly 200 people. That's amazing. And I will be back next week. There we go. Cheers, guys.